A woman stands in the dock. The charge against her is witchcraft, but this is not about cursing crops or speaking with the devil. The court alleges that she magically steals men's private parts, that she keeps them as pets in a bird's nest, and that she feeds them oats and corn like livestock. This isn't a fairy tale. This is from the Malleus Maleficarum, the official witch-hunting manual of 1487, a book used by educated inquisitors. And the story of the penis stealing, which was not folklore to them, it was a clear and present danger. A woman could be tortured and executed for this exact crime. This was the medieval world, a place where the lines between law, faith, and sheer insanity simply dissolved. The institution that drew these lines was the Catholic Church, and its obsession with controlling human desire led to a system so complex it's almost unbelievable. Imagine you are a married man in 13th century France. The church itself has bound you to your wife, but being intimate with her was a logistical nightmare. The church created a sexual calendar, a flowchart of sin. You could not have sex on Sundays, that was the Lord's day, not on Fridays in honor of the crucifixion, not on Thursdays to respect the Last Supper. You could not have sex during the 40 days of Lent or the 4 weeks of Advent, or on the dozens of saints' days and festivals scattered throughout the year. And that was just the calendar. Was your wife menstruating? Forbidden. She was considered unclean. Had she just given birth, no contact for 40 days, was she? Breastfeeding, some priests argued that sex would corrupt the milk and poison the child. One German text prescribed 3 years of fasting on bread and water for a couple who dared to be intimate while nursing a baby. When you add it all up, a perfectly obedient Christian couple might be allowed to have sex less than once a week. And even on those rare, permitted nights, the rules were suffocating. Only one position was deemed acceptable, missionary. Anything else was a perversion. A sin, woman on top, 40 days of penance. Any position that might prevent conception, 7 years. A 7th century manual still in use centuries later declared that oral sex was the worst evil a person could commit. Worse than heresy, worse than murder. The church even tried to regulate enthusiasm. Too much pleasure was a sin, making noise was a sin. The ideal act, according to these manuals, should be brief, silent, and performed without any pleasure at all, as if compelled by duty alone. But behind this iron curtain of piety, a different reality was unfolding. The same priests who preached these impossible standards were often paying a fee to the church for the right to keep mistresses. It was called the collegium, a fornication tax. Financial records from England and Germany list these payments right alongside routine church income. In one German territory, 1/3 of all parish priests were paying it. Hypocrisy was not a secret, it was an accounting entry. And when the rules were broken in a more spectacular fashion, the consequences could be monstrous. There is the story of the nun of Wotton from 12th century England. A young nun, forced into a convent as a child, became pregnant by a man who worked there. When her secret was discovered, the other nuns did not simply report her. They captured her lover, they dragged him before her, and they forced her with her own hands to castrate him. But the story doesn't end there. One of the senior nuns then grabbed the severed organs and shoved them into the pregnant girl's mouth. The chronicle, written by a man of the church, then claims her pregnancy miraculously vanished, a sign of divine forgiveness. The forced mutilation was not seen as a crime, it was an act of spiritual purification. This twisted logic was not confined to the monasteries, it infected medicine and law. Medieval physicians, following ancient Greek texts, believed in something called the two-seed theory. They thought that for a woman to conceive, both the man and the woman had to emit a seed, and for the woman to do that, she had to experience pleasure. This medical theory had catastrophic legal consequences. If conception required female pleasure, then a pregnancy was absolute proof of consent. A legal text from 13th century England states it plainly. If a woman conceived after an assault, the charge had to be dropped. Because in their minds, without her consent, she could not have conceived. Think about the sheer horror of that logic. A woman endures a violent attack, she becomes pregnant from it, and the pregnancy itself becomes the evidence that she is a liar. This was not some fringe idea, it was standard legal doctrine across Europe. We have court records showing rape charges dismissed for this very reason. At the same time, the medical establishment was prescribing orgasms as a cure. Women who went too long without sex were said to suffer from hysteria or womb suffocation. The belief was that the uterus would literally detach and wander around the body, causing fainting, seizures, and emotional distress. For married women, the cure was regular intercourse. For widows and unmarried women, the cure was manual stimulation by a midwife to provoke what they called the necessary release. For centuries, this was a recognized medical procedure. and the public's involvement in private lives could become even more direct. In France, if a wife sued for an annulment because her husband was impotent, the court demanded proof. This led to the trial by Congress. The couple would be ordered to attempt intercourse in front of witnesses. The procedure was clinical. They were brought to a room. A panel of older women, considered experts, would first inspect the man. They might try to manually arouse him. If that was inconclusive, the main event began. The couple was put in a bed, with court officials and doctors watching through gaps in the curtains. The pressure on the man was immense. Most failed. We have records describing men who later remarried and had many children, but who were utterly unable to perform under the humiliating gaze of the court. For other crimes, the punishments were designed for maximum public shame. Under the laws of King Cnut in 11th century England, a woman convicted of adultery would have her nose and ears cut off. This was a calculated act. It permanently destroyed her beauty, marking her as a sexual criminal for the rest of her life. Archaeological digs have found female skeletons with these exact facial mutilations. These were not just threats, but perhaps nothing captures the surreal nature of medieval justice more than the animal trials. Bestiality was considered one of the worst possible sins. Both the human and the animal involved were sentenced to death, usually by burning. But the animal was not simply killed. It was formally prosecuted. The animal was given a defense attorney. Witnesses were called to testify about the animal's character. In one 16th century French case, a man named Jacques Ferron was convicted of relations with a female donkey. He was sentenced to burn, but the donkey was acquitted. The court records state that numerous villagers testified to her virtuous and good-natured behavior. They concluded she was a victim of violence and had not consented. The donkey was set free while Jacques Ferron burned at the stake. This was a world where an animal could be legally determined to be a victim of a sex crime. In another case, a pig was dressed in human clothing before its execution to emphasize its role in a human sin. This deep sexual anxiety eventually merged with a fear of the supernatural. We return to the witch. The Malleus Maleficarum claimed that witches didn't just steal penises, they collected them, 20 or 30 at a time. They kept them in boxes or birds' nests where the stolen organs would move about and eat oats. The book tells a story of a man who climbed a tree to get his stolen member back from a witch's nest. The witch told him he could take anyone he wanted, except for the largest one. That one, she said, belonged to the parish priest. This wasn't satire. This was evidence presented in court. It was a belief system. There is a 13th century mural in a public building in Tuscany that depicts a penis tree, with women harvesting the members like fruit. Now, some of the most famous stories you have heard are likely fiction. The supposed right of a lord to sleep with a peasant bride on her wedding night, a myth. Historians have found no credible evidence it ever existed as a legal right. Chastity belts, almost certainly 19th century forgeries or Renaissance jokes. The reality was often stranger than the myth. Many cities operated official, government-run brothels, often with the church's blessing. In London, the brothels in one district were nicknamed the Bishop of Winchester's geese because the local bishop licensed and taxed them. He was profiting from prostitution while preaching against it. These places had bizarre rules. In one German city, married men were forbidden from visiting on Sundays. Jewish clients had to pay double. Prostitutes were forced to wear identifying clothing, like yellow hoods with bells, to mark them in public. This entire, strange, contradictory world came to a sudden and violent end. In 1494, a new disease arrived from the Americas, syphilis. It spread across Europe in a matter of years. It was terrifying. It caused horrible sores, rashes, and could cause the flesh to literally rot off a person's face. The pragmatic medieval system of regulated vice collapsed. Cities that had run brothels for centuries shut them down overnight. The fear of this new, sexually transmitted plague was greater than the desire to manage human behavior. The age of regulated sin was over. The age of moral panic had begun. Looking back, it is easy to see this world as just barbaric and insane, but it was also profoundly human. Every grotesque punishment, every impossible rule, every bizarre trial was a desperate attempt to impose order on the chaos of human desire. They failed, of course. But the records of that failure give us a window into a world so much stranger and more complex than we ever imagined. What part of history's dark side do you want us to explore next? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this journey into the past fascinating, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the historical shadows.